Hello, this is my first current educational issue for Emily Swan's Foundations class. I chose to do an article from Ed Week, and it's basically about how being in the military so dependents of military personnel are affected in their education. So the reason why I chose this topic is because my father was in the military and I grew up what's called as a military brat, and that's dependents of military personnel. So what that means is that military, whether it's Army, Navy, Air Force, any of the arms of the armed forces move around a lot. I moved anywhere from like 8 to 10 times between the grades of kindergarten and 12th grade. And that's really common of all armed forces families. So what happens is, and this is actually backed up by evidence, that there are inconsistent and uneven education gaps because public schools vary so much from state to state, and that's according to the National Military Family Foundation. There's a school district in Virginia, it's Virginia Beach School District, where a third of the students in the district are from military families. So 70% of military families don't live on post or base. That means that anyone could have a military child in your classroom. And basically what that principal and superintendent has found is that everyone comes in at different places, that they are having to test frequently to find out where students are at and what they know, and reteach a lot. So I wanted to test this according to my real life experience. There's me, and then I have 4 siblings who all grew up in the military, an older brother, and then 2 sisters who are close to my age, and then another sister who's 8 years younger. So I called and asked them 4 questions about how they felt about our education when we were growing up, moving from state to state. The first question I asked them was, how do you feel about your education you received moving from state to state? And it was interesting because all of them agreed, and I agree with them, that it was patchy, that we definitely had like spaces of education that were gone, particularly in math. Every single one of us said math was an issue. And I didn't do this like all of us in the same room agreeing. I actually talked to everyone individually, and individually everyone said math was a major problem for them. My sister was even put in a resource math class, but the resource math class was doing math that was way behind what she already knew, but the regular math class was ahead of what she knew. And so even though they were trying to help her in this resource math class, that gap never got filled in. So the other interesting question that we have when it comes to being in a military family is, how did having kind of this gappy, spacey education affect the way you viewed a higher education in a collegiate setting? So of the 5 kids in my family, I'm the only one who actually has a degree. My siblings all attended college at some point, but I'm the only one who actually finished. And so it was interesting. For the most part, they thought that having a patchy education did make it harder for them to get to a degree. My one sister actually pointed out that her difficulties in math are what stopped her degree education. She had 90 hours of credit, but then when she got to her math classes, had failed so hard, and her emotional state when it came to that was so bad that she felt like that it wasn't something that she could do. Her growth mindset was shut down. And so, whereas my sister, who's 8 years younger than us, who only moved around during her elementary years, she doesn't feel like it affected her education at all. But of course, that's just your elementary years, the early years of learning. So she was in a more stable environment, which leads me to my next question and the other article that I read about why military families are tending towards homeschooling. And in this article that was done in Ed Week, it does state that most families do experience the gaps in education, or they're only places for a short time, 6 months at a time, and so it doesn't make sense to enroll the student and then pull them out again. It also says that more than 6% of the 1.2 million children of active duty military parents are homeschooled, according to the estimates by the Military Child Education Coalition. According to that same coalition, we find out that there are that there's no national public data on military dependent students and their academic progress or their attendance at school or long-term outcomes such as attendance, higher education and workplace readiness. So it's kind of like literally 1 million kids are being lost in the gaps, and that's why parents are tending towards homeschooling their students. In my family, that wouldn't have worked. My mom didn't have a great education and also didn't have the confidence, but and my family all agrees on that homeschooling wouldn't work in our situation. But the big thing that we felt like would be lacking in a homeschool environment was the social aspect. And moving from place to place forces you into being an outgoing and well-spoken person, and trying to create relationships quickly, and having a homeschool environment would have diminished those benefits, which we felt like were probably the best that we got from our growing up years. So, I mean, you can take that for what it's worth, but that's kind of what we thought about it. The last question that I asked them was, do you think that growing up with the military influence influenced your career? 2 of my sisters are physical fitness trainers, and they agreed yes, because my dad frequently was doing what's called PT, or personal training, where he'd hold his feet and he'd make us run, and it was always to push harder and go faster and be healthy. My brother actually did join the reserves and served for 20 years and retired. And then another sister said that she's interested in law because we did live in Fort Leavenworth, which, if you don't know, is famous for its enormous military prison. Anyone who commits crimes against the military or who are in the military and commit crimes go to Fort Leavenworth. It's a high security, top security prison. And she really gained an empathy for prisoners and understanding that they are people too when we lived there. And that's really stuck with her whole life. I can honestly say, as an education student, but also a theater major, that moving around a lot really did force us to step out of our comfort zone and to be okay with change. So I think that it did influence, growing up military, our career paths as adults. So basically, I just really thought it was interesting that homeschooling, I think, does have a place, especially in military families, so long as it's a situation where the parent is good at it and researches it and it's beneficial to the kids, and they still get the social aspect of the homeschooling environment. So really interesting to look into it, and I hope you enjoyed it.